I wanted you to talk a little bit about how your background as a painter, because that's what your first creative outlet was, how that plays out in your filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think it's both very positive and in some ways kind of negative. And it's interesting, again, I haven't seen this film in so long. Um, and I often actually arrive only for the Q&A, and I didn't realize it was at 6:30, and I was like, "Oh, I guess I'll just sit and I'll watch it." And you know, uh I did a short this summer for ITVS up in San Francisco, and we shot it in Jamaica. And and when I was cutting it, there were things in a way that I had remembered from this film that I really tried to compensate for in this little like short exercise, a 17-minute thing I did for them. And because I think as a painter, one of the things that you learn, early on is to deconstruct, is to find in a way the center of your work. And that was always how I was taught. So if you make a picture and you love the picture, really to get to the heart of what the true essence of the work is, that you have to pull it apart. And it's in the reconstruction after you have torn it apart that you really find the trueness in it. And I think that that has always been my philosophy, because it's what I learned. It's how I learned to be an artist. And that what I think is interesting is that you can't do that in film. I mean, you can, but you can't. And that in this film, I remember making choices as a writer, then making choices as a director, and then getting into the edit and having to kind of confront some of those choices. And that my philosophy as a painter and as an artist was that, well, we'll just pull the film apart. And then we'll just reconstruct it. And the editor, ever so patient, would say, okay. But the problem is that, of course, unlike as an artist, if you make a mark and you take it apart, you can make another mark. I mean, obviously, as a filmmaker, if you don't shoot the scene, you don't have it. And so I think I think that that's the great negative, almost in a way, that I've had to, when I did the short this summer, I had to kind of relearn or sort of unlearn, I guess, this sort of tenet, I think, that I've kind of lived by for so long. And a lot of it was because I think I really didn't understand fully how to kind of construct those moments, and how to really kind of very simply give this information that the movie needed. But a big part of it, I think, is sort of feeling like you can just pull it apart, reshuffle, but actually you kind of can't. You have to have all the elements to do it. I think in the positive way, I think I can't help but to see the world visually. And so, that's the greatest part of it, I think, in a way, is that you can sort of, I would rather show something than tell it. And I think in general, that's a wonderful thing. And also, I think I'm obsessed with color and, and sort of the art in a way of color, what color means. I think that, I think about Hitchcock a lot, for instance, who I think really cared about color and the metaphor of color. And I love the idea of sort of transitions and like breathing, and that, silence, for instance, is something that can be so powerful when juxtaposed with sound. Sound all the time is not so interesting to me, but if the starkness of one versus the other, things like that, I think that I feel like are all about the visual language.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I've interviewed so many black filmmakers over the years, and they quite often say that they engage in battle after battle with studios who say, I know that you're black and I know that you're writing something that you say but it doesn't seem black enough and it doesn't seem this enough. I was wondering, did you get those sorts of notes? What kind of feedback did you get about, and I don't want to assume that you had battles, but I'm just curious, what sort of feedback you did receive, when you were showing this film?
I think that the main thing, in a way, because the film is so kind of very specific in its language, so I don't think that anybody, even if they wanted to readjust it, could have done it. It's so doggedly kind of just what it is. But I think that what I found most interesting was sort of this idea of who was going to watch the film. And it was a big learning curve, I think, sort of for all of us, myself and the producers, both of whom had only done like 1 or 2 projects prior to this. To really kind of, I felt like there was an interesting lack of understanding and almost, I would say, a mistrust of Black audiences, and I thought that was really interesting and sort of a shame that there was almost a sense that this film could be sold to an indie audience that was sort of a intellectual kind of white audience, but there was a real kind of I think in a way mistrust in the sense of like, well, Blacks weren't either going to get it, or that we are so conditioned by what we eat and and I mean that metaphorically, of course, we, in a way, what you're speaking about, there's a broadness in a way to the way that the way that a lot of Black films in sort of the mainstream are made sometimes, and that I think that there's almost this sort of I think that there's just sort of a lack of faith in a way that if you bring the film to people of color, that they will see themselves reflected in it and therefore be connected to it. I think that we allow ourselves often as African American filmmakers to have the, one way or another way, and maybe even 2 ways, but just sort of to find a way to kind of look at all the sides of it, which I think is hard. It's hard to kind of want to do that, to be able to do it, and then frankly to be able to kind of creatively do it. So I think, succeed or fail, I think it was a thing that we wanted to try to do. So.